Roy Orbison, The Police, Brian Wilson, Yes, The Rolling Stones, Jimmy Page, Billy Preston, The Moody Blues, The Monkees, The Byrds, George Martin, Kiss, David Bowie,
Wow.
Todd Rundgren, Harry Nilsson, Cheap Trick, Lenny Kravitz, Tom Petty. Anybody that had a comment about the Beatles, it's collected in here.
a person or two. Welcome back to episode 15 of Innersleeve, the podcast taking a deep dive behind the scenes look at all things music here on SoundMojo, powered by the WatchMojo Podcast Network. We have Frank Pavan and Joe Pacheco joining us from SoundMojo over in Montreal. Gentlemen, how's it going?
Awesome, dude.
Awesome, man. Can't complain.
Can't complain
you said
myself.
That all in one breath.
I know that was quite the breath that I had to deliver, but here we are. And very excited about today's guest also. I know we all are. You know, sort of what we're going for is the new wave of MTV here on the program, bringing you new updated music content. And one of the guys that really made this format come to fruition and come to life in the way that we know it goes by the name of Denny Somach, an iconic promoter and A&R in the music world who's worked with the likes of the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, Alan Parsons, you name it. Alan Parsons, the producer of Dark Side of the Moon. He tells us all about how that record came to fruition and what made it so special. Also talks about going on the road with the Rolling Stones when they stopped doing interviews. He was one of the only people in this era to get access, and much, much more. So we won't hold you any longer, and enjoy this conversation with Denny Somach. Denny, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing very good, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. So much to talk about. Award-winning producer, author, business person. The first question, I guess, for you would be, how did this journey start for you? I know you went to college in Pennsylvania.
Well, I entered college as a business major. I wanted to be a stockbroker. And last 2 weeks of my high school year, senior year, I did an internship, and they said, "Oh, go do an internship in something that's not your regular business, but that you like." Well, I like music, so I figured, you know what, see if I can get an internship at a radio station, which I did for 2 weeks.
Right.
Then I entered college, and the college had a radio station, so I thought I'd join that because, well, this is cool, and I was a business major. Mm-hmm. After a few months, I ended up getting a job at a local radio station. I went to school in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania at Moravian College. And in Allentown, Pennsylvania, there was a radio station, and I got a job as a fill-in announcer.
Okay.
Basically, it's a long story, but it was cool. And I figured, this is pretty nice. And I ended up really going, wow, I wonder if this could be a real career. I changed my major. They didn't have what's called like communications or journalism, or so It was art English. So I have a BA in art English while I was studying. And when I was in college, I worked at this radio station. And then right when I graduated, I got a job in Philadelphia. And then I kept thinking to myself, well, I'll do this for a while until I can get back to being a stockbroker. And I kept getting jobs and figured, well, this is a nice thing to do until I get a real job. And then the next thing I know, I'm 30 years old and I'm still doing it. And I figured, well, maybe I can make a go of this. So I never got to become a stockbroker. I'm still looking.
Still looking, potentially. No, that's fascinating, though. So what groups at the time were really circulating on the radio, and what groups were really making an impression on you? And I guess what year was this would be a good question.
Well, this would be the 70s.
Okay.
Of course, I grew up. I was like 10 years old or something when the Beatles appeared on Ed Sullivan.
Right.
And that did it for me, like everybody else. That's the music that obviously I started listening to. And then, of course, I got into the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds and the whole British invasion thing, and then the psychedelic. I just became a big fan of music. And there was such great music coming out in the late 60s and early 70s when I was growing up. And you had, bands like Cream and Traffic and, the Yardbirds, which turned into Led Zeppelin. I just got really into the music and studying it. And after I did that for a while, NBC announced that they were starting a rock radio network called The Source. Mm-hmm. So they were looking for people to submit show ideas. And I submitted an idea for a show, and they liked it. And they said, okay, we're going to give you a deal to produce this show. And next thing you know, I'm producing syndicated radio shows. And I did that for a little bit while I had my radio job. And one day I decided, you know what? I think I can make a career out of this. I'll give it a try. So I left my daily radio job in Philadelphia. I moved to Philadelphia by then. And I was music director, and I was doing afternoons at a major station there. And now I was producing syndicated shows, interview shows and things for NBC. And that led me to everything else. So did I answer the question?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So I guess the first thing I'd want to know would be what gave you the edge to where NBC wanted to sort of hire you right away? And what was the premise of this first show for people who don't know?
Okay. Well, what I had presented to them was two things. One, I figured that they needed to have a rock news service. And I created something called the Rock Report. And I had connections, and we would gather the news. And this is pre-internet, pre-satellite, so we'd send a tape up 2 or 3 times a week with the rock news, because it wasn't, unless there was an emergency and somebody died, it wasn't that essential, because nobody's going to, it's not like we're going to be beaten by the internet.
Right.
So we were doing that, and their affiliates loved it. They had 100 and some affiliates, and they would send it down to the affiliates every day. And then they needed a year-end show. So I created a show. I figured, let's do something that involves all the news of the year musically. And this was the end of 1979.
Okay.
So I said, okay, the show's going to be called The News That Rocked 79. They loved it. I produced it, ended up doing The News That Rocked 80, The News That Rocked 81, 82, for several years. And
wow.
After 81, after I did 79, 80 for the radio, in 81, when MTV went on the air, they were looking for a year-end show, and I pitched them the TV version of the radio program, which was already out there. And they were just starting out. They loved the idea, the concept. So then I started producing MTV's year-end show. It was rocked 81, 82, 83, 84. And after that, they started doing their own show called The Year in Rock. But I produced their first 4 years of year-end shows. And that got me into all sorts of other kinds of business. And I started, doing a little bit of everything and realizing I could make a career out of it.
And you made quite the career out of it. I mean,
I'm not really done yet.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You're still going. It fascinates me that you had the vision to look at a product on radio and then on television, and to not just look at it from a perspective of what is already there, but to look at it as to what could I add to this? I'm curious, how does that perspective of looking at it from a different lens, when did that come in? And was that something that you always sort of had?
I think that that's something that I always had, because I always looked at things, and throughout my career, I would meet with people and they would say, we need a show for this. And I was just really good at creating it. One of the shows I later did after NBC in the early, I think it was 82, Rolling Stone magazine wanted to get into the radio business.
Right.
So the guy that was heading up their programming department, I had worked with at NBC, and he called me up. He had me come up to the Rolling Stone offices, and he said, look, Rolling Stone's going to go into the radio business. We need a weekly show. Do you want to see if you can come up with something? So I came up with I figured, okay, Rolling Stone magazine, what are they, they're the Bible in the music industry.
Yeah.
They're respected as knowing the official history. If Rolling Stone says it, it must be true, type of thing.
Right.
So I created a show. I said, well, let's do a weekly show, and each week is like a different theme. And because really what we're doing is we're doing the history of rock, but the history of rock hasn't been written yet. It's still being written.
And you can see that. That's a great point.
So I said, let's call it and they had a well-known book out at the time called The Illustrated History of Rock, which was like the Bible. So I said, well, it's very simple. Let's follow the format of the book. We'll call the show The Continuous History of Rock and Roll. They loved it, and I started producing it, and that show was on the air for about 3 years and did very well. It's cleared on like 200 stations.
Wow, that's insane.
So getting back to your question, there was a need. and I looked at, okay, how can we fill the need? That's sort of what I look to do. Somebody says, or I think somebody has a need. I'll create it and say, you need this. It works both ways, but
Are you surprised by the lack of that vision that was already existing at such big companies? Because the average person would think, oh, NBC, they have tons of people in those positions already.
Yeah, but not in the rock radio part. Yeah, in the television division. Could they come up with another, All in the Family? Yeah, but that's not what I did. No, there was nobody there. To them, it was, this is NBC. Oh, that's the music with the guys with the green hair over on that side of the room. That's where the radio department is. So it was still like, we didn't wear suits and ties.
Sort of the outliers or the outcasts, maybe.
I get just different. Mm-hmm. They knew we were onto something because rock and roll was becoming a huge business. Records were selling by the millions and millions.
Right.
Bands were touring and making, it was just the economy was changing. And they realized that rock and roll was becoming a business. So right place, right time has a lot to do with it also.
That's true too, definitely. So who were some of the
Let me ask you a question. How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this for just over 10 years now because I started very young.
How young?
I was just turning 10 years old.
Okay. Well, very good.
Thank you very much.
And who are some of the people that you've had on? I'm interested.
I mean, we've had a lot of people from, Steve Stevens to Gene Simmons to Ace Frehley, Chris Holmes. We've had a lot of people.
All right. Now let me ask you a question. Yeah. How does somebody like you get Gene Simmons to come on? I assume you didn't pay him, right?
No, actually, it took years of persistence, and I ended up actually meeting him face to face, and I talked to his assistant. It's one of those situations,
right?
But
I gotta hand it to you. That's very good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it's refreshing for some of the rock guys to talk to someone from a different generation because they're so used to people in their own demographic. So I'm very curious about your days at MTV. I'm sure you would, a lot of artists started coming around at that time. Who were some of the first big artists you really started connecting with personally?
Well, now remember, I was working at MTV as a special consultant. I did not work there. I mean, I went up there, I had a desk, but I wasn't an employee. Okay. I always tried to be an outside, they hired me as a consultant and I would create the programs and sometimes I would then produce them. Other times they would ask me to analyze the news department and decide what they needed, things like that. Yeah. So I worked with just about everybody. I guess the first really big group was a band called Yes. Worked with them very closely and became very good friends with them. Ended up producing the first live broadcast ever by a rock band out of Madison Square Garden. And that was with Yes in 1980. I have since worked with I've worked with just about everybody. Rolling Stones, right. I've interviewed them. I went to Munich, Germany on tour with them for a little bit to do interviews. At NBC, we would do these these specials that would run on the weekend called Legends of Rock. And I would usually go out, visit the artist at their home or go on tour with them to capture the essence, turning, into a special. So, gosh, the people that I went out on the road with Ted Nugent, REO Speedwagon, Def Leppard, Styx, Lynyrd Skynyrd, The Who, Billy Joel, the who's who of classic rock. Yeah, pretty much so.
When you're on the road with, let's say, the Rolling Stones, going to Germany and stuff, you said you're doing interviews. How often are you talking to them? Is it just every couple hours? Is it?
Let me tell you how this works. When you're dealing with the Rolling Stones, they have their own rules. Okay?
Right, I would imagine.
Something you'll learn. It's like with Gene Simmons. He makes the rules and you follow him.
Oh yes.
So I had this is for another show idea. I wanted to do a magazine type format rock and roll show. So when MTV came on the scene in August of 81, I approached CBS Television to do a magazine show that was sort of, would highlight the rock bands and the video world and interviews. Right. But for regular television, remember that MTV was a cable channel, was only on in 12 million homes.
Oh my gosh.
So I was looking to CBS, and CBS said to me, okay, well, who are you going to have on this show? And I said, well, they said, you got to get big names if you want to get a show on, we'll give you a pilot that will air, which is what you can hope for. And half-hour pilot, will air it. But, who are you going to get?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I said, there's only one band that's still together that's the biggest band in the world, and that's the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
So now you got to remember, this was the early 80s.
Okay.
The Stones ended up giving only 2 interviews during the entire 80s.
Wow.
They gave one interview in 1981 to a woman named Rona Barrett, who you won't know the name, but
I don't. Years
ago, she was the gossip. She was Entertainment Tonight before there was Entertainment Tonight.
Okay.
Rona Barrett reports, she talked to everybody. And she was the word on everything. So I put in a request for an interview. And I told CBS, no problem, I'll get the Rolling Stones. And they said, okay, well, if you get the Rolling Stones, you can have the show.
Right.
Of course, I don't have the Rolling Stones, but I knew the guy in their office. So I went over to see him, and I told him, I said, I have a show at CBS, but I don't have a guest. I need a big guest. You think the Rolling Stones will do it? No. Of course, he thought, CBS, you know what? We have a new live album coming out, and, we're not coming to America. There's no plans. Okay, we'll do it. You have to go over to the band's touring Europe all summer. So you go over to Munich. And I said, okay, I'll go over to Munich, and they're playing 3 days there at the stadium. And, I said, okay, so when's the interview? And they said, well, whenever they tell you. Okay. I get on a plane. I go to Munich. I sit around the Munich Hilton where the Stones are staying. I go to the show. I see them. I wait, 2 hours before showtime on one of the shows, I'm told that Keith and Ronnie are ready to talk backstage at the stadium.
Wow.
2 hours before the show. So I had my crew. We went over, did the interview with Ronnie and with Keith. Done. Then they said, oh, Bill Wyman's available. Do Bill Wyman now. Did Bill Wyman. Charlie almost never gives interviews, so I wasn't,
Okay.
So I had to get Mick. Mick is not going to do an interview an hour before he goes on stage.
Right.
So the show goes, and I go, okay, so when are we going to do Mick? And they goes, well, when he calls you. I said, okay. So what do you want me to do? Well, go wait in your room. I waited in my room didn't happen the first day. Second day, get a call. Was their off day between the 3 shows.
Okay.
Mick's going out clubbing tonight. But before he does it, you can do the interview. I said, okay, great. What like 5 p.m? No. Be in his room at 10 o'clock tonight.
Oh, geez.
So 10 o'clock at night, because Mick going out to Mick meant midnight.
That's like 8 a.m. for him.
Yeah. So we went and did the interview, and it was a great interview. And obviously I got the show.
Mm-hmm.
And the pilot did okay. It didn't turn into a series, but you know what? I did a rock and roll pilot for CBS, and I got the Rolling Stones. So
seriously, I mean, that in and of itself, right, is a massive thing.
Well, the credibility of that really made it easier, because it's like anything else. People say, well, who have you done? Well, I did the Stones, and you did the Stones? Okay.
Right. That's a good way to start the conversation.
You can't do any better. The Beatles aren't together anymore. So, and Led Zeppelin isn't. So it's the Stones. Anyway.
Right.
So that was, that's how that happened.
Man,
and
what a story.
Other artists that I worked with at the time on that show, I also had Asia, which was a brand new band at the time. And they happened to have the #1 album in the country. Their debut album sold 3 million immediately. Wow. Also on the show, I had made friends with REO Speedwagon, and they were the biggest American band. They had that High Infidelity album out, which had 3 huge hits. So they were monsters.
Seriously.
And then I had this unknown band from Britain that was originally from Australia, and nobody really wanted to deal with them, but I did. And they were called AC/DC.
Oh,
and I interviewed them, and I had an unknown Angus Young and Brian Johnson. So we had a clip from them, we had a clip from the Stones, a clip from REO, a clip from Asia. I don't remember what's on the rest of the show, but those were the 4 guest stars. And
what a
we
lineup.
put the show out. Again, we did something that hadn't been done too much. We put the show out, and in the CBS, in the cities where CBS owned the station, like New York, Philly, Los Angeles, San Francisco, where they had what's called the owned and operated stations.
Okay.
We simulcast the show in stereo, and I got a local radio station in that city. What city are you in?
I'm in Edmonton, Canada.
Okay. We didn't have any stations in Canada.
Yeah.
But you get the idea.
I get the idea.
So, yeah.
So you actually had it put on the radio so that people could hear it there as well.
It was simulcast at the same time. And if you had on an FM station, you'd hear it in stereo and you'd watch the show. And it became a promotion for the radio station. They were promoting the show. We're going to have the stereo of it. The Stones are going to be on it.
So that must have went a long way for promoting that.
Oh, tremendous.
That's huge.
Yeah.
You couldn't even avoid the event at that rate. That's really incredible.
I don't know. I was too busy working on it to remember what happened.
Right. That's true. Fair enough. Looking back at an amazing moment that happened in the early 70s, on this day, as of when we're recording this, Pink Floyd actually released Dark Side of the Moon. I was just curious as to any sort of thoughts or feelings on that record or memories of Pink Floyd.
Well, you happen to hit a very good topic. I happen to be very familiar with Pink Floyd, but more importantly, I happen to be very familiar with Dark Side of the Moon, and I'll tell you why in a second.
Okay.
You know anything about Pink Floyd? They were notorious they didn't give interviews.
Right.
Almost nobody knew their names. Nobody could name the 4 guys in Pink Floyd.
Right.
Nowadays, maybe, Roger Waters, wasn't he in the band? David Gilmour, but nobody knew the 4 guys in Pink Floyd, believe me, until years later. But in the 80s, I developed a really good friendship to this day, very good friends with him. When I go out to Santa Barbara, I go visit, or we get dinner when he comes to Florida, where I am now. We get together, or I go see him every time he tours. I'm very good friends with Alan Parsons. Does that name mean anything to you?
I've heard that name countless times, yes.
All right. Well, Alan Parsons is the guy who engineered Dark Side of the Moon.
Right.
And he was an engineer at Abbey Road, and he did Dark Side of the Moon. But I'll tell you some stories that a lot of people don't know. The reason Dark Side of the Moon, it was a great record, obviously.
Yeah.
But, they had Alan Parsons, who's considered one of the greatest engineers of all time. You know who he is. Mm-hmm. Alan Parsons Project. He's done all sorts of other people, the Hollies, Al Stewart, on and on. But Pink Floyd was before he did the record, 2 years before the record came out, the band he had worked on a little bit, one of their previous albums, Omaguma, I think, or Adam Hart Mother, one of them.
Okay.
But he was, he was just a basic engineer.
Right.
They said, look, we want you to work with us on our next album, which we just finished writing it, but we don't want to record it until we play it live. So we're going to go out on the road with a quadraphonic sound system. We want you to come on the road and be the engineer for the live show.
Wow.
Well, can you imagine? Alan Parsons is doing the live. Most people didn't know who they remember the Dark Side tour was amazing because of the sound and everything. And this is what Alan told me. He said, and it's true, when they got done and they went into the studio, he was so well versed in the album because he'd seen it 50 times already.
Right.
He knew so when they went to record it, that's what made it so unbelievable. They knew every nuance.
And he'd heard it in such a massive system night after night, too.
Yeah, and he ended up getting a Grammy nomination for Best Engineered Album. And the album's been on the charts forever.
Right.
And so it was a groundbreaking album. It put Pink Floyd in another league. They actually had somewhat of a hit single with Money.
Right.
But it really, what it did for the business? It made it like, nobody wants to buy the single. They want to buy the whole album and listen to it from beginning to end. And that's
Yes.
when albums started selling. I mean, Sgt. Pepper is the one people point to, and that's true.
Mhm.
But Dark Side is the one where, no, I got to have the whole album, and I got to listen
Yes.
to the whole thing from beginning to end. And had you seen Pink Floyd, the previous tour,
Right.
you already know the album. You're going to be in love with it before you even put it on.
That's such a
you know all the
fascinating
songs.
concept to me because in my lifetime, it's never been done that way where you tour the album live before releasing it.
I'm
That's
sure
amazing.
there may be some unknown people that have done it, but they were the first major band to do it. And you're right. It is an amazing thing.
It is. Wow. Thank you so much for that story. I appreciate it.
Not a problem.
There was one more topic I wanted to touch on, and
Sure.
that was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They just
Okay.
recently announced their inductees.
Right.
Iron Maiden, also people such as Jay-Z, Mary J. Blige. I'm just curious on your thoughts on, first of all, the nominees, and second, mixing hip-hop and pop in the Rock Hall. How do you feel about
Okay.
that?
I'm a purist. Okay. I consider myself to be a rock historian. That's how I'm an author, I'm a producer, but rock historian is what I want to be known for.
Right.
So I'll give you my opinion.
Okay.
By the way, I think it's next year or later this year, the Hip Hop Hall of Fame is opening in Brooklyn.
It is. Okay.
Okay. I think it should be pure rock and roll. And I'm not saying these people aren't talented. I mean, Jay-Z is very talented, Whitney Houston, but it just doesn't seem right, especially when you have bands like Jethro Tull and King Crimson, Vanilla Fudge and Styx that aren't in the Hall of Fame. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It is.
I mean, okay, nothing against Dionne Warwick, but Dionne Warwick in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Now, I get like Johnny Cash, okay, important, founding father of the movement and all.
Yes.
And I get the Muddy Waters and, the building blocks. But I just don't see a place for pure hip hop,
Right.
and leaving out other people. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, how else would a band? And I don't know if you're familiar with a band like King Crimson.
I am.
but
Yeah.
Very pivotal. I mean, if you're a progressive rock fan, King Crimson invented progressive rock when they put out In the Court of the Crimson King.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's
Without a
where Yes
question.
came from. That's where Genesis came from. That's where, so a band like that, a band like Jethro Tull, ridiculous.
Yeah.
Is Peter Frampton in? I don't think so.
I don't believe
Vanilla
so. No.
Fudge, who are legendary. To me, they are, if you trace back hard rock in America, two bands. A band out of San Francisco called Blue Cheer.
Mm-hmm.
They had one big hit called Summertime Blues.
Okay.
Look it up.
I will.
Play that song. It's the heaviest song ever.
Nice.
And it was a top 40 hit, made it to number 17. And Vanilla Fudge, who had a hit with, they did a cover of You Keep Me Hanging On by the Supremes, which was just amazing. But they actually were the first ones to really do hard rock and make it popular. So when those two bands, and bands like Yes and Deep Purple, and they'll all tell you Vanilla Fudge is a heavy influence on them.
Right.
So when they're not in, it's just, there's something missing there. And I think it's very political. And I don't know, now they're sort of running out of rock people, but they're going to run out of the opportunity to put rock people in, as industry. I forget what they have this award where if you didn't get voted in, you become whatever it is. And I so anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting the classic rock archive.
You are.
Which is sort of a classic rock hall of fame.
Oh, wow.
Called the Classic Rock Archive. And if you go to my website at dennysomach.com, you'll see some video on there and some audio. And ultimately, I'm going to put all my stuff in one place and start announcing these people are, it's not going to be like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame where, but it's going to be a place where you can go hear stuff and see stuff. I'm not looking to put, stage clothing or, that's not not competing with the Hall of Fame.
Right.
They have that soda.
But a different collection.
If you want to know serious history of rock and hear old radio specials or commentary or interviews or read or know anything about the classic rock world, you'll come to the Classic Rock Archive. And eventually we'll have a physical location, but it'll start online. And I've only talked to about 30 classic rockers. and they love it. And they've all said, yeah, I'll support you. So
that's
it's
amazing.
in the early stages, but
Well, I can't wait to see that. DennySomach.com. Of course, everybody can go check it out. And of course, the Rock Podcast, TRP from Podcast One, is going to be available, and that'll be everywhere podcasts can be heard. Thank you so much again for your time. And the book, of course. Yes, please plug the book. Tell us where we can find it. Amazon?
This is my new book. Amazon's got it. I was going to do a book tour and go out, and it was going to be all in the bookstore. You can get it on Amazon and other online places. It's called A Walk Down Abbey Road. And what it is I've taken some of my interviews over the years. I got hundreds of them where people talk about the Beatles. So I collected all the interviews about the Beatles into the book, and some of the people that are in the book, just so you know, Elton John, Billy Joel, Pete Townsend, Phil Collins, Steven Tyler, Roy Orbison, The Police, Brian Wilson, Yes, the Rolling Stones, Jimmy Page, Billy Preston, the Moody Blues, the Monkees, the Byrds, George Martin, Kiss, David Bowie, wow. Todd Rundgren, Harry Nilsson, Cheap Trick, Lenny Kravitz, Tom Petty. Anybody that had a comment about the Beatles, it's collected in here.
a person or two.
Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees wrote the foreword. Wow. And there's some cool pictures on the back. That's me and at the Dakota in John Lennon's apartment with Yoko.
Wow.
We did the Yoko interview, which is in the book.
Holy smokes.
Pete Best, the original.
The original.
That's George Martin, the producer. There's Alan Parsons, my friend.
There he is.
Alan Parsons is Ringo.
Wow.
And there's Mickey. So that's what I'm out. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about the book.
Definitely. And anytime you have something else to promote, we'd love to do something again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay. Take care. Stories for days from Denny Somach. I mean, never running out of stories, this guy.
I know. It was like, keep going, give me more.
Yeah, definitely like one of those guys who, you don't know what happens behind the scenes when it comes to these type of productions, but he's one of those people that's doing the heavy labor behind the scenes. I enjoyed the contrast. I enjoyed you and him trying to feel each other out, and when he was kind of impressed with how young you were, right, and all the names that you've interviewed, and he's like, well, damn, I don't know how you got that interview, but it was like kind of a feeling each other out moment.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because like it's almost like he's coming full circle in a way of that's how he got his start, right? He said he was 2 weeks before finishing high school, and he was already working in radio, and he wanted to be in finance and stocks. And never know. Life just took him here you go, man. We have enough money, people. We need some really interesting music people,
Seriously. No, it's true. And it's always fascinating to get their perspective, because I didn't always realize that these older guys, I guess when you think about it, they don't spend much time talking to dudes in their early 20s. They're often talking to guys around their age. So to be able to talk about the same topics they're familiar with different types of people, and obviously everybody in the, our viewership is sort of in the same range, I think it's really interesting and unique for them. So that's something that I maybe wasn't aware of.
I've had a similar experience in my personal career when I got into radio at a young age, your age, probably 22, 23, and having these experts that have been already done 40 years of radio, and they were asking my opinion on stuff. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And taking it seriously. And at the time, I remember being impressed, like same reaction you had, where it's like, like, wow, these guys are taking opinions from me, the new guy, So that shows a level of maturity where, he's like, he can respect, like you said, you're feeling you out. So he felt a mutual respect there between you two, So that was really interesting to watch.
Absolutely. It's like our founder of here at Watch Mojo. He says the best idea can come from an intern, So it's like, I think anybody with that idea, they have the longevity in any business.
True. That's it. When he said that nobody knew Pink Floyd, the members' names, right? In the early days. And it's like, how could you not know? Just from my perspective, because that's all you heard about was Roger Waters, David Gilmour, and all the names. So it was interesting to hear, like, wow, okay, that really goes way back, when they were still underground-ish.
And speaking of Innersleeve, you read the liner notes, right, Joe?
Totally. That's what I would do as a kid, like the pictures, the artwork, read the lyrics, the producer name, who did this, what's that. I didn't know at the time mastered. What is mastering? What is this? What is that? But that's, as, our fellow Dre the Music Man once said in his first episode, no Google needed, just read. And like you realize, wow, Rick Rubin did this album. Rick Rubin did that album too,
That's the truth.
That's the way we got it. It was word of mouth. It was like you just, passed along. People made mixtapes for each other and just passed them. That's how I heard a lot of the stuff. I never owned a Wasp album, but I had somebody make me a mixtape. And there was a few Wasp songs on it, so.
Right. You were going to add something, Frank?
No, I was just going to say, didn't Denny show you a record at the beginning, at the top of your interview? Or was it a picture?
He had a book, his books.
Oh, it was a book. It was his book. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's written a couple books.
Yeah.
Basically a Beatleologist.
Yeah. No, there must be some interesting stuff in there because I'm a big fan of Sgt. Pepper's is my favorite Beatles record. So even though, I'd love to, I'd probably pick up the book and just get some behind the scenes stuff. I like that kind of stuff. There's another producer, I think Ken Scott, who also worked at Abbey Road and he wrote a book a couple years back, and that was such an interesting read to see how he worked with Elton John and how he worked with Bowie and all that stuff. So.
Speaking of records, we have an awesome anniversary in the world of rock that came up this week. On March 24th, 1986, Van Halen released their first record with Sammy Hagar on vocals entitled 5150, of course coinciding with the anniversary of David Lee Roth leaving. Now, Joe, I got to go to you for this. You were, a Van Halen fan at the time. What's your first reaction when they say David Lee Roth is out, Hagar's in?
I think the first reaction as a young Van Halen fanatic was like, what are you, crazy? How could you have Van Halen without David Lee Roth? So I was definitely in the Roth camp.
Okay.
For sure. But I still remember actually hearing the premiere of when it came out, what was the song? Why Can't This Be Love? When they launched it. While I enjoyed the song, but I was still like, I'm still a Roth guy, and I kind of sort of snubbed Sammy in that way because I still like the songs, but it's still, I preferred Roth.
You were partial to Roth.
Yeah. Until Unlawful Carnal Knowledge came out in 91. That's when I kind of sort of really started to come to the Hagar side and really accept like, holy cow, this is like, for me, the Van Halen I like. I listened to 5150, and besides the singles that I know very intimately over the years, but the rest of the album, I listened to it again this morning, and there's just some stuff that doesn't resonate with me. It's not like my favorite by far Van Halen album. The first 6 are like all top 6s, and then Balance with Sammy Hagar. That's probably one of my top Van Halen albums.
Right. But not exactly this one. I sort of tend to agree, Joe. It's like a lot of this, I think what they tried to do was follow the recipe. So they found that the synth sound really worked for Jump, and it had worked sort of for them at that point. So I think what they were trying to do was follow the Yellow Brick Road, so to speak, and just continue with a lot of synths. But I don't think that a lot of these songs work that good. You're right. It doesn't really resonate with me. And it's a weird thing with this record because I feel like the singing is always really good. I feel like every aspect of it is always really good, but it doesn't have that cohesive aspect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and still, it's their first #1 record. It sold 6 million copies.
Wow,
so 6 million. Really well. Yeah, it did really well for them.
In '86, that's massive.
Yeah, that's
huge,
it. Like it got that song got up to #3, top 3 on Billboard. And it's also their first album. I remember noticing at the time it was the first album with no instrumental guitar track.
Yes, that is true. That's a milestone for Van Halen.
Yeah. And what's funny is I read when I was doing some research for it and read that because like it was April Fool's, which is today, which is why we're talking about this. But it's like David Lee Roth announced his departure in less than a year. They already had this album going, and even though apparently it was like they were working on it for the last 3 months. Up until the release, but it's just interesting to see that like how they really did quite a shift right away, and what was proposed was that the label actually proposed they changed the name from Van Halen to Van Hagar.
Oh, see, I've always heard Van Hagar, but I didn't think that was a legitimate proposal.
No, but I mean, thank whatever that they didn't listen to them. Thank you.
Seriously, that would have been, a little bit
fire
off.
that intern,
It was the intern's idea.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one idea we won't take from the intern. That's we got to know our limits here too. Foreigner guitarist Mick Jones was actually one of the producers on this album, and it's funny how it comes about and how divisive this Hagar Roth thing became, because he was brought in after longtime producer Ted Templeman chose to go work with Roth instead of on this record. So very interesting that like the camp was getting split.
Yeah, but then what's funny is for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge in 1991 was co-produced by Ted Templeman. So it was, I guess, it didn't, if there was an argument or whatever, it didn't last that long because they still worked together for at least one more album.
Another recent anniversary that's actually on the sadder side is the passing of Marvin Gaye. He was 44 years old. An investigation revealed that there was some domestic issues between him and his father that had been sort of ruminating for quite some time, and he ended up being fatally shot by his father. What is probably one of the most shocking stories in music history, is it not?
I would say.
It's got to be.
It's got to be up there for sure. I mean, this, obviously before my time, but I always... I'm thankful that I was introduced to Marvin Gaye, not through anyone I know, but through, funny enough, Kygo, because he remixes a lot of old songs, right? So he had Sexual Healing, but obviously redone. And once I heard that, I just kind of dove into Marvin Gaye's music, and a supreme talent, that's for sure. And weird enough, he was born on April 2nd, so it was almost like on his birthday, the day of his. I don't know, would you call it? His murder. It was right. It's a weird situation. His dad. It's a tragic situation. His dad shot him. So, anyways, and he was born in 1937. Like he was by no means like he would be by no means young today.
Was there ever a verdict as to why he was still with his family if he was such a successful singer?
I have no clue.
I really wonder about that. And if anyone in the comments knows, I would definitely like to find that out, because, there's been documentaries and such, but it focused a lot on the relationship and not as much on the why. I'd be curious to know why. But definitely just a beautiful talent, one of the greatest voices ever, and he will be sorely missed. There's no question about that. Speaking of April Fools, I think we'd be amiss if we didn't mention what I think is ultimately the ultimate troll song, the ultimate gag song. And can you guys guess which song that's going to be?
I would say Never Gonna Give You Up.
Yeah, I have a pretty strong feeling that's the one.
What's funny is I was around when the song was ginormously popular, huge hit, and then it became, it always became like a trope, a funny thing, people made fun of it. And then now my 8-year-old kid even knew about it, because now it became such a thing as they call Rickrolled. You've been Rickrolled. So they'll put a link and you'll click on it and it'll bring you to that video. I wonder how many of those just must have blown up that video.
You know how many times I got had by that, or I got tricked by it, because you're scrolling through Twitter as a kid, and like you said, right, this song is of another generation, at least to me, but I just am so familiar with it now because I literally got tricked on it, whether it be scrolling through Twitter and a breaking news item breaking video, but then it just links you straight to that, and you're like, shit, I got but it'll forever live. It'll be immortal in terms of an ultimate, like you said, Cassius, ultimate troll song video for false news, essentially. Yeah.
It's so strange because it was a big hit commercially, and I wonder, when did people start to sort of see it as a gag? Because he wrote it as a very serious song. He must have got a platinum plaque when it came out. He must have been like, holy shit, this is it. And then now it's still a hit, but for different reasons.
People are, yeah, exactly, right? Imagine making a song seriously. You're an artist who wants to make a song you firmly believe in, and then it gets twisted, a 180 spin, because some people on the internet just felt like your lyrics were perfect to troll people. It's crazy.
Once you put something out there, it's not yours anymore. It becomes whatever the people do.
The internet
with it, right?
remains undefeated in many ways.
Yes.
I noticed this pattern, when it's 20-something years goes by, you make fun of the song or that era, right? Everybody made fun of the 80s, and now the 80s is cool again. So it's funny to see this, and how it became so laughed about, just like even Chuck Norris was so funny and to be made fun of. Then it became so cool.
Mm-hmm.
It became all
and he
Chuck
started
Norris
off
jokes.
Cool. That's the thing. He started off cool, they get funny, and then go back.
That's it. And then it was hugely popular. So it's it's like a pattern, you know. If I'm sure we can find other examples of things.
Yeah, I was just trying
like
to
David
think of some.
Hasselhoff,
I was just trying to think of some other examples, and maybe this individual, troll video. It's a music song, but became a troll video. Was the kind of it opened the door for like the modern day GIFs, because we always take things out of context now, right? Whether it's like some WWE from the top level with a chair GIF, or these things are intended for different moments, but we just apply them to make jokes and make light of things. So maybe that was the first ever GIF. Who knows? The
first snapshot of something hilarious to be played on repeat.
It's funny because I always say like there's like memes have existed before the meme was something on screen, right? So like there's certain things that exist in society. What are they? They're a meme, but technically we didn't have a physical way of saying a meme, but like,
it's like a TikTok. You would just say something funny to your friend or something witty, and they'd be like, "Oh, that was good." Now you just say it into your phone, and you can get seen by 100,000 people.
Yeah,
that's it.
Water cooler talk is now viral.
Yep.
Well, we covered a lot of ground here on this episode of Innersleeve. Joe, I know there's a lot of exciting stuff going on at SoundMojo, including some new content from our friend Dre the Music Man.
Yeah, in case you missed it, check out his latest video, Songs Can Grow on You. As we said last time, it's just about like giving, playlist culture, giving songs a chance, listening to the entire album. And like, sometimes you'll find that song, 2, 3, 4 listens. Oh, now you like it. You understand it. It resonates with you. Check that out in case you missed it. We also have a bunch of awesome videos this month on SoundMojo from the SoundMojo artists.
Come on, black people out in the streets, time to wake up. Allies down for the cause, time to wake up. Every race, color, and culture, you better wake up and work together. Ain't no stopping us now. Come on. Wait with me for the world to end. Wait with me for the world to end. Wait with me for the world to end. You call me when I don't care. Gonna run from the monsters that hide in my bed. Gonna hide all my feelings as I start to pray. Heavy metal, violent times got a way of making you feel special, okay?
All the links will be in the description below. You can check out all those artists. And we have a lot more awesome artists coming up in April. So definitely stay tuned.
Always content being pumped out. And of course, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Of course, make sure to leave a comment. And if you're listening on a audio service, be it Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, leave a rating and review. We want to know what you guys think. We want to build those reviews up in the Apple Store, etc. And always looking to please you guys with the new content. Also on YouTube, hit that subscribe button with the notification bell. And look out for our community tab. We have polls going up, we have updates, and we always want to know what you guys want to see and hear next, and we give you the chance to participate. So look forward to seeing you on the next episode, and thanks for tuning in to Innersleeve.